Okay, Chapter 15. Let's talk about classroom management. So what do we want in terms of student behavior? What to expect? Teachers believe that self-control and cooperation skills minimize disruptions. They're also essential skills for students to learn for lifetime success. So they're really important to teach. Teachers want students to comply in an appropriate fashion to teacher requests and academic tasks, have impulse control, deal with problems, anger, and negative feedback appropriately, which we all know that's a big one. Sometimes we all struggle with dealing with problems, getting negative feedback. That can be hard to cope with. Be cooperative and courteous with peers. Stay attentive, involved, and productive, and follow the rules. So you can see that there's a lot to being a good student, right? There's quite a bit behaviorally that students need to do. So misbehavior is often related to inattention to task, crowd control issues during transition, getting work accomplished in a timely fashion, and students acting cool and testing the limits. Which is why a lot of times when you work with students, you don't want to engage them in front of an audience, because when they don't have an audience, then you can work things out often in a much better way. So common misbehaviors: tardiness, being unprepared, that's a big one, not attending, talking out, calling out, mild forms of verbal and physical aggression, you know, those types of things. Passing notes or, poking somebody, something like that. Well-articulated rules and procedures are particularly important for students who need explicit support. What are some examples of the rules and procedures that you feel are important in your classroom? How will these rules and procedures be communicated to students? This is an important one because oftentimes what we don't realize is that maybe sometimes what students learn at home might not be the same skills. They might be seeing things modeled at home that don't help them at school. And sometimes we think that students should know things that they don't. So really having those well-articulated rules for different instances can be critical for students. Significant behavioral excess and behavioral deficits. So behavioral excess, so this might be high frequency behaviors. This might be getting out of your seat a lot. High intensity behaviors often, hopefully, are low frequency, but this is like a student that will hit. And so they've got these really significant behaviors, but even if somebody's hitting once a week or once a month, that's pretty serious. And so those would be considered high intensity behaviors. And then high duration behaviors talk about how long the behaviors last. So if somebody throws a tantrum and it's the length of time that really makes it a behavioral excess. Why does this happen? Well, we've got lack of social skills, lack of information regarding appropriate behavior, often lack of coping skills can be in there as well. We talked about how, there's a lot of things we want students to be able to do and to be able to manage, and it's pretty difficult. Okay. So behavior management and readiness. So your classroom organization, arranging the physical environment, valuing your instructional time. If you show how much you value your instructional time, then students will also value that instructional time. Being prepared, coordinating resources. So if you have a well-organized classroom and you show that you respect that classroom, then students are more likely to respect that classroom. Effective instruction, delivery of motivating and accessible instruction. We've talked a lot about this because if it's not accessible to students, if they can't access it in some ways, then of course it goes right out, right? If I don't know what's going on and I can't access what's going on, then I might as well misbehave. Because a precursor to misbehavior is students' inability to understand what's going on in the instruction. Valuing instructional time involves conducting transitions between and among activities efficiently and with little disruption. Transitions that are not well structured can cause some children to become involved in inappropriate behaviors. Describe strategies or resources that have led to effective that can lead to effective transitions in your future classroom. Okay, so behavior management readiness, a climate of care and respect, having authentic relationships that highlight collaboration, emphasize trust, promote positive communication, teaching self-control strategies. And again, a lot of students will need these self-control strategies, and modeling of positive communication, some sentence starters, and really highly structured elements of that will really help them. Civility and respect, tone and body language. We all know our body language, and going back to tone, it's not what you said, but how you said it, right? That used to get you in trouble with your mother. Active listening, giving them your full attention, showing active listening to me is really showing the other person that you're trying to discern what they're saying. You're trying to draw their meaning. You're trying to understand them, and that's that active listening. Private interactions, if you need to discipline a student, doing it in private is far better, because then there's not the embarrassment factor of doing it in front of their peers. So if you can do it with a student on their own, much better in a quiet way. Nonverbals also help, and those types of things. And then positive expectations, having those high positive expectations and letting students know that you've got those high positive expectations for them. Because when you show a student that you believe in them, they want to show you that you should believe in them. A climate of care and respect, culturally responsive practices, so engaging in self-reflection, again, having those authentic relationships with students. If you have an authentic relationship and you've already got this positive establishment, even if you do a faux pas and say something that would be offensive in that culture, they can interpret it based off of how they know you feel about them. So that really helps. And we've talked about being proactive about these types of things. And the more proactive you can be about building a positive relationship, the better that'll help you when you do have to do discipline. Recognizing differences, integrating students' background into instruction and helping them feel that connection. Students' behaviors can be a way to respond in the community and peer expectations. Of course, a lot of people believe that all behavior is communication. So students are communicating with you when they're engaging in these behaviors and trying to figure out what they're trying to communicate, and taking that minute to reflect on that can really save you a lot of time in the long run. Tiered management, just like with academics, we've got the tiers. We've got our universal practices. These would be our mission statements, our rule and procedures and behavioral supports. This will be things like, oh, we're going to have an assembly. Let's talk about what it means to be at an assembly. How should we behave at an assembly? And so you're going to do all those pre-corrections, and you might even practice. Let's practice lining up. Let's practice this. And that's stuff that you do for the whole class. Oh, let's see if we can do it better or faster this time. Taking into crisis considerations, so there should be crisis plans. People in your building should be trained in case somebody has a behavioral emergency. If somebody is a danger to themselves or others, there should be people that are trained to respond to that. And then documentation to make the plan accessible so people know what to do when those things happen, no matter what student it is. And those would all be universal. And so the more we can do universal, the less we typically have to do in terms of tiered instruction, but we'll still have some to do. So tier 2, we talk about specialized supports and interventions, targeted interventions, and ultimately for our students with high behavior and social emotional needs, if we can give them wraparound support and try to connect them to services outside of the school setting that they really need. So some more tier 2 specialized interventions that you'll hear about. An FBA is a functional behavior assessment. And what that is, it looks at a student and tries to figure out what is maintaining that behavior, what function is that behavior getting that student, because we all continue to engage in behaviors that have some kind of payoff for us, right? And so if I'm engaging in this behavior over and over and over again, there's something I'm getting from doing that behavior. And so what we need to figure out is, okay, so here's this negative behavior that a student is doing. They must be getting something from it. And what is that? And how can we teach them another way to get that and to access and meet that need of theirs that this negative behavior is meeting in a more pro-social way? Check-in, check-outs are where students would meet with somebody in the morning. A lot of times throughout the day, they've got a card, and then at the afternoon, they'll meet with somebody. And depending on exactly what they're checking in and checking out with, but it gives them extra adult attention. It gives them time to reflect. They've got somebody that's going over what they're doing, how their day went, what their plan for the day is, those types of things. So it's a little bit more. And then students might have individual behavior contracts where if they do certain things or they agree not to do certain things. Behavior contracts lead into behavior intervention plans, which often students with IEPs, if they have behavior needs, need to have a behavior intervention plan. And so this plan simultaneously strengthens their behaviors that are positive, builds on what they already have, and reduce the negative behaviors that are being targeted. Oftentimes with a behavior intervention plan, we realize that there are skills that students are missing, so we'll directly teach social skills as part of a behavior intervention plan, or other skills, such as how do you, I've taught my daughter, for example, she's 4, to say that to just ask for attention. So when she wants attention, she doesn't have to throw a stuffed animal at me or something. She can just say, Mommy, I want some attention. And I can put down my stuff and say, yes, my love, what would you like? And so I know that sounds silly, but some students need to be taught a signal or something if they need teacher attention. And behavior intervention plans should be based on some kind of assessment. And so they're usually based on an FBA. So we do an FBA and we figure out what the function of that behavior is. And then we go, okay, so here's this new behavior we want them to do. What do they need to know to be able to do that new behavior? What new skills would they need to be able to engage in that new behavior? And then how can we reinforce that behavior? There's an emphasis on self-management. A lot of times the tracking of behavior plans and behavior contracts as much as possible are the student themselves whenever possible. And because the ultimate goal, right, is student independence. And this is where we talk about shaping. Behavior plans will start off with, if you can focus and stay on task for 5 minutes, then you'll get the reward. And then becomes 7 minutes. Then it becomes 10 minutes. And then it becomes 15 minutes. And, we gradually get to where we need to be so that students can attend for the same amount of time. And ultimately wean them off of having that plan. Why is it important to begin tiered management efforts at the universal level? Why not focus initial efforts on the most intensive interventions for students who are misbehaving? Successful behavior management requires considerable planning and preparation. What steps would you take to get your classroom management ready before the arrival of your students? Consider the relationship between instruction and student behavior. How can instruction that lacks supports and accommodations contribute to the disruptive behavior of students with learning problems and disabilities? So wraparound supports. Community school is the most effective place for service coordination. So when you think about it, schools, we have access to the students, right? We're the ones who know that they exist and we know that they need what help they need, but we don't have the support to meet their needs like some other places do. But we can be the kind of this central point to helping them access those. So use a positive strength-based commentary during conversations with families. So we all know this. We'll focus on what the students can do and how we build upon those strengths. And understand that you, the teacher, contribute to the process by helping identify, clearly defining, and prioritizing needs. So what is it that this student really needs? Developing action plans and interventions. Collecting data is key. And here's where connecting with others will really help. Connect with the school counselors, connect with the principals, connect with the school psychs, and all of those people, because they may have lists of community services that students would be eligible for. So, for example, students with intellectual disabilities can get and autism can get disability services where their family can get things like respite care so that their family members can go to the store without having necessarily to bring the student with them, because you can't just, students with high behavioral needs, oftentimes you can't just get a babysitter, right? You need somebody that's highly trained as a babysitter. So even those things are kind of difficult. So there are community supports, and as a teacher, if you may know that some things exist and parents might not know about them. Okay, so putting it all together, of course, again, this is easier said than done, but remain patient, keep things in perspective, and be aware of the big picture. And I know that this can be difficult because a lot of times it's that repetition of these behaviors that can kind of make, they just get on teachers' nerves. They get on all of our nerves, right? And it's that fact that it's not that they've done this once, but they've done it 20 times. Practice diplomacy, remain poised, reflect on your own actions and get help when needed, and show your pleasure when helping students. Show them that you care and you enjoy interacting with them, and that'll really go towards the bonding. We've also talked about self-care and how important self-care is so that you can, because as teachers, we always want to be in a position where we can remain even keel and we can model what it's like to remain even. And if we stay calm, then our students will stay calm. But in order to do that, we have to be getting sleep and be taking care of ourselves so that we can be the best versions of ourselves that we can possibly be. A substitute teacher packet is one useful classroom organization resource. Such a packet highlights the essential information one would need to teach and manage the class during short-term absences. Describe what you believe should be in a substitute teacher packet and include the rationale for items that are included. Crisis situations are incidences when students present extreme physical and emotional behavioral responses. Although such instances may be rare, it's important for teachers to know what to do if and when such actions occur. Do you believe it's important that all teachers be trained in safe, non-aversive methods of physical restraint? Why or why not? The answer to this question will also depend. If you have a student that has some of those real high intensity behaviors and they're in your classroom a lot, then you're going to really want to talk to people about some of those safety precautions. Because if a student frequently has those behaviors, then you'll want to be trained on how to handle them. Why is it important that consequences, particularly those directed to inappropriate behavior, be delivered in an educative rather than a vindictive fashion? What strategies can be used to help during these stressful situations? One thing that Rebecca says, and I've picked up from her, and she says it to her children, and I say it to my children, is we're always on your side. I'm on your side. Everything I do is to help you. Everything I do is because I'm on your side. And I think if you're able to communicate that with everything you do, then students really have, and kids have a really different perspective about why you are instigating the consequences. Many believe that levels of civility and respect are decreasing among people. How can educators demonstrate the importance of these behaviors in positive, non-punitive ways? Yep. Okay, bye.